Hi, I'm Chuck Mason, and welcome back to the channel. We had a really obscure anniversary for one of the most significant events in American history, and you don't know about it. But it's something that is important for us, particularly in light of what are we going to do about what we face in a country in which we really despise the direction that it's going. And that anniversary was something called Operation Varsity from World War II. It was the largest airborne drop within the war. And it was combined United States forces and British forces were dropped behind German lines as the Americans were ready to push over the Rhine in 1945, on March 24th of 1945, in order to bring about the end of World War II. It's particularly important to me because I grew up with somebody named, I called him Uncle Blair, and he was my mom's cousin. And he was a paratrooper in the 17th Airborne, and he jumped behind enemy lines in Operation Varsity. He also had hand-to-hand combat in the Battle of the Bulge, like the other airborne divisions. And I grew up surrounded by these men, World War II vets. My father was a World War II vet. My mom was part of that greatest generation. And I got to see their resilience and their determination, and I heard all the war stories about people who were faced with unimaginable adversity on every level, and how they battled and how they fought through it to give us the world and the country that we have today. And it makes me reflect back on who we are as Americans right now in our context, asking ourselves, what are we going to do moving forward? Something else also happened within the last couple of weeks, and that's that my mom had passed away at the age of 93. I mention this because not for her passing as much as all of this culminating together helps me to really see the amazing people that they were and have myself ask myself, and even you listening, what we're going to do about making a difference in the world. And here's where I'm going to put this. I'm going to talk about my mom in particular as it relates to all the other World War II veterans. And my mom and dad were born during the Depression to parents that had nothing. My mom's parents had their first child in 1929, the year that Wall Street fell. They lost their home because my grandfather lost a job, and they moved out to 10 acres and a house that they rented in the country because they reasoned that they could survive if they could grow their own food. My mom never had running water until she left the dirt-poor farm for nursing school in 1950. She used an outhouse all of her life. She pumped water from a well. If she wanted to eat, she worked the fields from the time that she could walk. She worked the garden, whether it was picking potato bugs, whether it was hoeing weeds. It didn't matter what it took, and it didn't matter how young or old she was. It didn't matter the weather. She worked. All the kids worked. If they didn't work, they didn't eat. My father, who signed himself out the day of high school, the day he turned 18, in February of 1944 and went to war, was the son of a World War I veteran. My grandfather was gassed in World War I in the trenches, in some of the worst fighting, and his nervous system was scarred. He was a machinist when he left for war, and when he came back, he had a tremor. His hand shook, and he could no longer work as a machinist. There were no VA benefits. He raised a family on the most meager incomes, most meaningless jobs that he could find in order to be able to put food on a table through the Depression. My parents had nothing. And yet my father worked on the GI Bill to make it through medical school. My mom made it through nursing school, and they worked and they built a life. You know, we ask ourselves about the hard elements of our world today, and it's a challenge. We take a look at politics, and it's a challenge. But I think about my parents who came from the devastation of the Depression. I think about my Uncle Blair, who had to fight hand-to-hand combat behind German lines if he wanted to make it home. And so I want to ask us, what are we willing to do? Not only to improve our lives, but to improve a country. What are we willing to face to make a difference? Look, I know that it's not the same world. I know that when Blair got out of the service, he could have worked a job in a factory. He could have supported his wife. A person could have put his family through college back then, that homes were cheaper. The standard of living was different. I get that. But here's what hasn't changed about the American people. And here's what hasn't changed for you and I. And that is the level that we want to work. And we want to invest in ourselves, and we want to invest in the country. If there's one thing that we've learned over the last couple of weeks, if you're concerned about America and wanting to make a change, is that Trump's presidency is not going to secure the America that you want long term. And again, that's been shown by what happened in the House and the Senate for the fact that we could not get transgender protection for women's sports through the Senate for Trump to sign. Everything he has done is going to be undone by the Democrats the minute they get back into the White House. So the question remains, what are we going to do? And what are you going to do? And how are we going to improve our own lives and the country? I'm going to offer you 3 solutions, or 3 things that we as individuals can begin to do. And these are 3 things that I learned from being surrounded by World War II vets, people that survived a depression, and people that had successful families and careers, however modest they might have been. And that is number 1, take care of yourself and become less fragile, which means if you're not working out, if you're not making yourself healthy, if you're not learning how to work, by the first thing of doing is taking care of your own physical body and making sure that you're improving your foundation with that, I want you to think about beginning today. Doesn't matter what it is. Take a walk, join a gym. Start putting in some effort. It's going to hurt, but what it's going to show you is that putting in effort makes a difference. The second thing, and I'm going to say that to you because these were incredibly self-disciplined people. They did not drink to excess. They did not overeat. They maintained discipline. And that's the first place you start. The second thing is, if you want to improve your life situation, regardless of where you find yourself, regardless of how hopeless you think it might be, make a plan, make steps, and conquer the first steps. My mom, God bless that woman, as I said, grew up on a dirt poor farm with nothing. She had a dream about becoming a nurse, and that was the way she got out of poverty. And you know what she did? She worked a farm in the morning, she worked her chores in the evening, and she studied. And that was all she had. But you know what? That was her plan, and she worked it. It didn't matter what adversity came. It didn't matter how hard it was. It didn't matter how tired she was at the end of a long day of being outside after school in whatever weather. The same thing with my father. The same thing with Blair. The same thing with Pete. The same thing with everybody that I knew from that generation. And the third thing is to recognize that there are opportunities here in America still, unlike any other country in the world. How you perceive those opportunities doesn't necessarily mean the value of those opportunities. It's tough and it's hard. But if you set your course and you start with these 2, you can make it. You're looking at somebody who started multiple businesses. And even at this stage in life, I'm starting another successful one. Look, I'm not a millionaire. I know what's possible for you and I if we simply follow those same elements. And finally, I'm going to say this. If you want to change the country, we have to apply the same thing. We're going to have to work at it. You can't rely on Trump. You can't rely on Washington. There's only one person you can rely on, and that's you. And that was the story, and that was the message of the greatest generation. It didn't matter whether they were in foxholes behind enemy lines. It didn't matter where they were serving within the war effort. It didn't matter whether it was a young girl who was born on a dirt poor farm. If they relied on themselves and they relied on their abilities and they gave it everything they had a chance. And that's what made them successful. And that's what gave us America today. And that is what is going to preserve America moving forward. I'm Chuck Mason. Thanks for being a part of the podcast. Please like, share, subscribe. And until the next time, God bless.